Today we've got Tom Cheesewright, Applied Futurist. No one better to speak to about the future of work than Tom. So Tom, I'm going to ask you straight away the most asked question you probably ever get asked. What is an Applied Futurist?
I work with organisations around the world to answer three questions. First of all, what does our future look like? And they're interested both in the next 5 years and the things that might take them out at the knees, and then interested in the next 50 years and what the possibilities are and what their vision and mission should be. And once we've done that exercise, we've looked at what the future holds, we then have to go, okay, well, how do we tell that story? How do we communicate that to their customers and what it means for them or their board and what they have to invest or their staff and what it means for the future of their careers? And then the third question we have to answer is, okay, what do we do about it? Like, you've seen these challenges or opportunities, you've explained them to us, and you've got us all excited or scared. It's generally a mixture of both. What's next? And that's why there's the applied bit in there, because they get involved in solutions as well as problems.
A common theme actually has come up in these conversations, and definitely something we've seen from experiences with larger organisations, older institutions, just get so stuck in the ways that even 6 months ahead seems like a wild look into the future for them. And that was the thing from my experience in banking. I remember we tried to get DocuSign signed off about 5 years ago. Got it through management 1, got it through management 2, hit middle management, no joy, fell apart, never heard of again. And a mate texted me in the second week of the pandemic saying, we've just signed it off.
Yeah, it's a big challenge, and everybody moves at different paces. Like, have you ever watched a lava lamp when it first starts up? And you turn the heat on, and there's that big ball of wax in there. And what tends to happen is like different bits of it heat up at different rates. And it all starts moving up, but then eventually it splits because some bits get hotter than others, and the hot bits shoot to the top and the other bits are left behind. And the same sort of thing happens in organizations. You've got these people who are really hot, like hot on change, hot on the future. And they tend to be, as you say, this isn't exclusively true, but they tend to be at the bottom of the organization and the top of the organization. And then you've got everybody else who's defending, quite rightly, their experience and what it's earned them. And I think, and quite often change has threatened their career in the past. And so, a lot of the conversations are about trying to make those people the drivers of change. So one of the things I say to all my clients is, free up 1% of the time for everybody you consider a leader in the organization to focus on the future. And I think unless you've got that, you're never going to give these people the brain space to see that actually some of these changes could help them. You're always going to have this fear response because they're so busy firefighting, keeping the wheels turning, keeping the organization moving, that any sort of intervention from outside, any sort of suggested change is just like, it's another ball that they just can't juggle.
Because one of the stats that we found from the research for the white paper was, for those who want to return to the office, it's actually the older generation who are far more comfortable working from home. The younger side are actually struggling from this because they're sharing a flat with someone, the two of them working off the same kitchen table. They're not communicating, they're not having that social interaction you see at work in an office and things.
We're seeing with our clients that you're dead right. Working mums is a great example where it just brings that natural flexibility. I think it's a hugely positive thing, but then we've lost somebody ourselves. We've seen clients lose people who are in that sort of 20 to 25 bracket who desperately want to get back to an office, the incidental learning, the social workspace, that sort of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, well, actually it'd be good to hear your view, Tom, of where that's going to go afterwards.
Yeah, I think there's almost a class divide that's happened. And I think what people have missed is that our expectations of adulthood are still set by the past. We still think that you're an adult when you sort of, in your 20s, you settle down, find a partner, have a kid, buy a house, buy a car, all these sort of traditional marks of adulthood. We still in our minds think of them happening in sort of your early 20s. Actually, those things all happen in your 30s now. Because for all sorts of reasons, economic, social, extended lifespans, etc. And so, depending on where you're at in that sort of that extended adolescence, if you're at the latter end of it, where you've got some space, you've got some cash, you've got a partner, all of a sudden this lockdown starts to look really positive. If you're earlier in that extended adolescence and you're living on your own, isolated, no partner, no social interaction, you're missing out on all those great things that you have at that point in life, then it's really just much less appealing, and it feels like total deprivation, as they say. And those issues need to be addressed. They need to be addressed really carefully by any organisation who's thinking about the future of work now. We're going to see organisations go one of two ways. you're going to see organizations say, okay, we either have to take an enormous amount more responsibility for our remote workers. And let's be honest, right? This takes investment. And so some employers are going to go, it's worth it, right? Our people are worth it. We're going to invest. We're going to go down that route. We're going to do it properly. And other employers are going to go, actually, do you know what? We've kind of broken some of the bonds between us and our employee. There's less difference now than there was between our employees and our freelancers. We've seen a 50% increase in the number of self-employed people in the UK in the last 20 years. We're going to see that continue to increase as some employers continue to go down that route.
Obviously, IR35 is at the moment still pending for March next year. Well, I've seen it myself firsthand. There are already people looking for perm roles that certainly haven't done that in the last 10 years. So has there been anything in this year or coming up in the next year that surprised you? Because obviously your predictions are very, very fact and database, which is brilliant. But has anything caught you out once the pandemic had hit?
So, I mean, the possibility of a pandemic was on the edge of my edge of my radar, if you like. It got a mention in the last book, the possibility. So my work is quite mercenary. I look at the things people pay me to look at. But once it's come in, it hasn't actually done anything particularly surprising, I don't think. All it's done is accelerate existing trends. The bits I hadn't thought about very much, and so the bits I found most interesting has been the human response. The real split between those who are trying to follow the advice, follow the guidance, isolate, minimize spread, etc. And the scale of the response from those for whom it's been this is a libertarian issue and our rights are under threat, and Bill Gates is using 5G to remote control our brains. Like, the protest in Manchester the other day, and the number of people, and actually the range of views at that protest, I found absolutely staggering. The scale of distrust that there is in the population of information coming from those sources. There is a long period of self-reflection to happen after this to say, if Brexit didn't cause it, the divisions in the country over a pandemic really ought to. What has caused these fault lines, and why is there so little trust in authority?
Just taking a point back about that sort of future hybrid piece, who are you seeing prepare well for this?
I did some work for Kent County Council recently, who've found actually that lockdowns worked really well for them. They found actually sort of better communication and collaboration between senior leadership. They found actually that they were quite pleased with how they dealt with the lockdown and their communication. And what was really interesting was the things that worked really well are some of the things that are kind of the natural parts of doing things asynchronously. So hybrid's really hard. You have to think twice before you just go back to those old sort of office methods of working. The flip side to that is you generally get much more sort of considered answers and considered solutions. You document them better, so that if things go wrong, you've got much more of a paper trail. And actually, quite often, people who are not very good at speaking up in that sometimes boisterous meeting, idea sharing environment are quite forthcoming and come out with loads of stuff. And this is what we found with the council. 99% of organizations are still, they're just at the point of going, okay, we survived this far. Now we've got to take some radical decisions about what's next. But people are really only starting to take the proper strategic decisions about what's next now. I think there's a huge amount of learning and best practice still to be established. And it's a real challenge particularly for HR managers now, because you're going to get lots of people who are used to being the voice, the people who are used to dominating the room, suddenly aren't. And they're going to find it really frustrating. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but you've got to deal with those people. You've then got this big development challenge. How do you not just retrain people in the technical skills of operating remotely, but actually, and I'm not going to call them soft skills because they're not soft skills, the skills of psychology and reading culture and empathy and communication, they're not soft skills. They're perhaps the hardest skills, of all.
I think your point on culture is spot on as well. I think in terms of the kind of boombastic, if you like, alphas and those sorts of people, the danger I can see is that they're going to be trying to drag people back into an office and have meetings and get people kind of working that way. And as you say, the exclusion point is massive for me. Who's absolutely sort of nailed the culture change aspect in a short space of time?
I haven't seen anyone who has, if they're really honest.
Right.
I don't think anyone's made that transition yet. I think the exception perhaps is those organisations that were already largely remote. You know, some people clearly had a head start in it, but even they've got, you know, things to learn about the culture. The real flaw I see in a lot of organisations is this desire to maintain a uniform culture across the organisation. And it was hard to do that when you were all in the same office, because you're all doing different things, dealing with different people and different processes and different skill sets. You know, fast forward that to now, where you've got people who are in different geographies, operating in different time zones, doing different things. You know, trying to maintain a uniform culture across that organisation is just a Sisyphean task, and it's a total waste of time. What you want is a really high productivity culture that works for software development, a really high productivity, you know, high welfare culture that works for finance or HR or all these people. And as long as you've got some sort of shared values, you just need that coherence between them, and then let people go off and define their own cultures, and actually go further than that. Let individuals define their own working culture as well. And the one thing that I've not seen hardly any organisation tackle is working hours. You're in at 9, you leave at 5, or ideally you're in at 8, you leave at 6 or 7. And yeah, that's how you demonstrate your value to the business. And until we get over that, no one's going to have a good working culture. I mean, I think Europe's ahead of all of us in many ways. Much more flexibility, much more adaptability around parental rights, particularly the Nordic countries. Do you know, if your best working hours are 10 p.m. till 4 a.m., as long as you're not doing your own health in, go for your life.
What can we look forward to? What's coming next? What's the most relevant things you see coming?
I think one of like a lot of people, lockdowns forced me to change my business. So, you know, primary income stream for me was public speaking. And obviously there's less of that now. I'm doing quite a lot of live stream stuff, but also I'm getting loads of inquiries now from really interesting organizations saying, look, our marketing efforts used to be based around events and, you know, typical product launches and things. None of that's happening anymore. We really want to talk about the future. You know, we want to talk to our clients, we want to do some analysis and research about the future. And then you're coming up to the end of the year where I always get asked, you know, sort of big predictions and stuff as well. So I'm starting to think about, you know, what I've got wrong in previous years and what I might get right this time around, having learned my lesson. The sad thing is I've learned not to be too optimistic in my prediction. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it seems. You know, there's definitely some interesting stuff coming. You know, if you look at our online expenditure and the increasingly rapid shift to e-commerce, it's added another layer to the sort of administration of adulthood. Like, you know, there's so much admin you'd have to do as an adult. You know, and now it's like, actually, okay, you're starting to do grocery shopping online. You know, you've got your other delivery services, your beer delivery, your milk delivery. Yeah, actually, there's such a big administrative load that for a long time I've been predicting that we'll start to hand off some of that stuff to AI, and I thought it was probably sort of 4 or 5 years away to really happen. And actually, I'm starting to look at next year now and going, you know, how soon can we move from comparison sites to something that takes this stuff just off my hands completely? But, you know, that's something like that says, actually, oh, look, you know, your car insurance is running out, and instead of spending an hour on the comparison site trying a good deal, you know, I'll just do it for you and come back to you with the best deal. And, you know what, even more than that, as long as it's more than 10% under what you're paying now, I'll just buy it automatically. You don't even have to authorize it. Just give me discretion and I'll sort it out. We spend more of the time on the fun stuff and less of the time on the, you know, if you've been sat at home at your computer all day doing work, the last thing you want to be doing is sat at home on the same computer for another 2 hours sorting out your car insurance.
I learned so much in the last couple of months about how the world is changing, and I think it's going to be the way you travel. One
of the things I think might be really interesting is, don't just go away for 2 weeks. If you're working from home anyway, go away for 3 months.
Yeah.
Go and live by the seaside, you know, for 3 months. But rather than buying a holiday home, just go and rent somewhere for a few months so you can get a change of scene and get some sea air and a bit of different exercise. Get your dog out on the beach.
Well, yeah. It will be interesting to see whether it's a holiday home, what model will work for people, because it is definitely, the opportunity is there, isn't it, to not have to commute.
places like Blackpool, some of the more rundown coastal towns. I mean, Blackpool's gone through enormous change in the last few years, but actually, some of these coastal properties might start to see very significant regeneration. I mean, overall, I don't think it's going to be an enormous trend. I actually think there's a very good reason people live in cities, and it's not. I think for all the attractions of the countryside, I think there's only particular points in your life where you actually can just leave the city behind and go and live there.
I think that comes back to that piece before when we were saying about the generation gap of wanting to be in an office and not. The thing you get about a city is you get that energy from it. So that with that gone, I think the younger generations will want that and they'll bring it back. Whereas the older generations might be thinking, I don't need to go and be in an office full of 25-year-olds anymore.
Like, again, you have to be really cautious about your culture and particularly your development, because those 25-year-olds learn loads by being around the 40-year-olds.
Yeah.
Historically, we just pick stuff up by osmosis. You watch how they work, you watch how they operate, you learn those lessons. And so if we're going to, we probably have to teach different lessons now. But if we're going to teach them, we have to think consciously about how we teach them. How do you take the combination of what those 40, 50-year-olds know and what you now need to know for operating in this new environment, and package it up in a form that you can teach people consistently wherever they are in the world, whenever they're working. And that's, the scale of that project, I think, has been probably underestimated by most.
Yeah, and this is a perfect advocacy for mentoring programs.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of mentoring, as you know, and I'm mentoring a couple of people at the moment. And it's particularly as we're developing new skills, and we're going to have actually one generation teaching the next almost as they learn. I think mentoring can play an enormous role in that. I
think that was something that companies maybe had, they saw as a barrier is, how do we just roll out a singularity mentoring program across the board? Whereas when they start to do it in different areas and focus on different things like diversity or well-being or a skill-based initiative, they see the impact of it. It's much more considered, it's much more thought through than just a drop it in somewhere and go, you're all doing this now. Yeah, but if you take that approach to some of the issues we've talked about, like managing your own working hours for maximum productivity, to actually effective communication in a remote environment, those are all really interesting sort of niche skill sets that you could take people who are doing it well, teach them how to package up their understanding, and then translate that into a mentoring program. It'd be really interesting. That seems like a perfect place to wrap this up. Wrap it up on a plug, Adam. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed that as well.